Hey all, Nonol here. It should be no secret that I was not a fan of how the writers for the SMG4 series handled the character of Mr. Puzzles in 2024. Built up to be this threatening and cunning villain who manipulated all of the recent major events in the SMG4 series, the conclusion to the year-long Puzzlevision saga saw the threat that Mr. Puzzles' character posed immediately undermined within the first 8 minutes, as Mario easily defeats him, and strangely, he's presented as much more of a cartoonish and pathetic character compared to the cunning puppet master presented in wotfi 2023 and the Puzzlevision episodes. Beyond this strange diversion they take with his characterization, we get little in terms of backstory and lore for him, and his motivations are very flat. This wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for certain villains, but for the main overarching antagonist of the SMG4 series for an entire saga, it is certainly underwhelming, especially when compared to the previous long-running saga's villain SMG0, who had no shortage of lore and backstory associated with his character, as well as an interesting and emotional motivation tied to an actual message of needing to be able to let go of the past and not letting yourself become obsessed with wanting to change it. Perhaps the one-dimensional nature of Mr. Puzzle's character and the lack of interesting backstory or lore attached to him could have been forgiven if Mr. Puzzles was less of a character and more so a representation of some sort of theme, but the Puzzlevision movie lacks any sort of substance like this, and seemingly completely lacks a message of any kind, besides perhaps the importance of not letting yourself be consumed by your passions and that there's more to life. I don't know, I'm grasping at straws here. This is all frustrating, as the Puzzlevision saga had a lot of potential in terms of themes or messages it could have expressed. For example, it easily could have been written to be about how the creation and consumption of entertainment made at the expense of other people's physical and mental health is kind of bad. That would have been an obvious thing to go for, considering the previous movies and some like the posters, for example. But there's probably other messages it could have been about too. So right at the beginning of 2024, they already fumbled pretty hard with Mr. Puzzle's character. It seems pretty obvious to me that the Puzzlevision movie was supposed to be the conclusion to Mr. Puzzle's character, and that he was never intended to be a recurring character. This is because it felt like the Puzzlevision movie had explored everything it could have done with Mr. Puzzle's character. There were no major unanswered questions or any unresolved character arc that could have been expanded upon for Mr. Puzzles. This has been proven by what they did next with his character after the movie. It appears the SMG4 team had not anticipated how popular he would become as a character, with him arguably being one of the more iconic SMG4 characters now, despite being such a recent addition to the series. As a result, only 4 episodes after the Puzzlevision movie released, he suddenly returns to the series with no build-up, or with this not being the beginning of another major story arc or anything. He just randomly and suddenly returns. And this, sudden return and the lack of solid direction the writers had for Mr. Puzzle's character for the rest of 2024, as we'll get into, is proof enough, in my opinion, that Mr. Puzzles was never planned to return after the Puzzlevision movie. The next story arc featuring Mr. Puzzles feels like a bunch of random and disconnected plot threads sewn together. A Charlie and the Chocolate Factory parody, plus a popular channel meme from the previous year, plus the recently defeated major antagonist, Mr. Puzzles. Despite how the Meme Factory arc was obviously made up on the spot, following the sudden decision to bring back Mr. Puzzles, it somehow ended up telling a more substantive story than the Puzzlevision arc, strangely enough. Mr. Puzzles actually goes through a character arc of having to learn to accept Leggy as his friend and embrace friendship. It's actually kind of sweet and adds some layer of depth to his character that allows you to actually develop some sort of emotional attachment to him. It actually hurt when Leggy transformed back to normal and Mr. Puzzles realised that he had lost the first and only friend he had ever made. This seems to make Mr. Puzzles resentful and seemingly placed him on a path where he would be seeking vengeance. This could have all led to something really interesting in terms of a character arc for Mr. Puzzles, especially if it linked into Marty's return soon after the Meme Factory arc, where he too was also motivated to be villainous by a desire for revenge. But no, instead of going in this clear and sensible direction to take Mr. Puzzle's character, they instead clunkily shoehorned in a childhood dream of his to own an amusement park into his backstory. They've shoehorned that in, and then they have him literally repeat the same character arc from the Meme Factory story where he learns to embrace friendship. There was no clear plan for this character in 2024 post Puzzlevision. What's even stranger about the wotfi arc, in my opinion, is that it seems like the childhood flashback stuff they expanded upon from the Puzzlevision movie was specifically addressing the critique of Puzzles having a surface level backstory and motivation. They introduced the character of Puzzles' dad and the struggling relationship they seemingly had, as Puzzles Senior was skeptical of the creative passions and dreams that Puzzles Junior held. Yet this is no further explored after it was first introduced in the Disney episode, and instead they just opt to repeat the character development that Mr. Puzzles already received in the Meme Factory arc, instead of expanding on his relationship with his father that they just introduced, and how this influenced his desire for fame, talent, success. It's such a wasted opportunity. Mr. Puzzles is an awfully written character, genuinely probably one of the worst written villains in the history of the entire SMG4 series. Lawyer Kong was a very basic villain, yet at least he was characterized consistently across the lawsuit arc, and arguably he more so served as a representation of the corporate side of Nintendo, more so than the goal was to create a compelling character with Lawyer Kong, unlike Mr. Puzzles. Yet despite this massive problem with the character of Mr. Puzzles, I still love him as a character for some reason. His design is really cool, his dialogue is fun, the music associated with him is really cool, his personality after the Puzzlevision arc, that of a cartoonish and pathetic villain who's evil for the sake of being evil, is really entertaining to me, despite that obviously being the incorrect direction they should have taken with his character. And, his voice acting is pretty great. Everything besides his character writing is, going for him. He has a lot going for him. Just accept his awful writing, which is really a shame. Oh, and I should probably also mention that this character alone has been responsible for gaining me a shit ton of views, subs, and money. So it almost feels like I owe this fictional character something for all my success on YouTube. Just overall, for whatever reason, he carries whatever episode he appears in for me, and he's probably my favourite SMG4 character if I had to give one. So this is why I really, really want to see his character done justice, for him to finally appear in a well-written arc for once, where he himself is a more than one-dimensional character who goes on an interesting character arc that actually leads somewhere. I know they can do it, his character definitely has the potential for it. Fortunately, wotfi 2024 left Mr. Puzzles with an open-ended conclusion. Having finally learnt to give up his obsession with fame and creating entertainment, Puzzles has now fully embraced the value of friendship, though he appears to have learnt the wrong lesson from what Meggy was trying to show him, as his belief in the value of friendship has now seemingly just replaced his old obsessions. Actually, his mental state seems worse than ever before, even more so than in the episode titled Mr. Puzzle's Lowest Point. He seems to have begun to become way more unhinged and crazy, most evident from him creating a new leggy from random objects after the original one, had supposedly disappeared for good. And despite this leggy 2.0 just being a collection of inanimate objects, he treats this like an actual living person. He also again expressed a desire to seek revenge against the SMG4 crew for everything they've done to him. To give credit to the writers for once, this could actually be a solid place to begin something completely new for Mr. Puzzle's character that doesn't involve him chasing fame and his creative passions. This could serve as a great setup to begin a fresh start for his character writing, essentially, after how messy it was in 2024. This is definitely a step in the right direction for fixing his character and finally doing something interesting with him. This development of his character towards becoming more unhinged and crazy, with this perhaps worsening from what we see in wotfi 2024 when he does eventually return after like many months locked up in isolation. This could be a good way to spice up his personality for people who were perhaps getting a bit sick of him appearing in 2024, because he appeared quite a lot. 2024 was really the year of Mr. Puzzles. And furthermore, the mystery and intrigue that could surround how he escapes from prison and who might aid him in this escape also has the potential to be a compelling mystery and a compelling story. But let's discuss something more substantive than just how the premise of his return and the possible switching up of his personality could be interesting and strong ways to reintroduce his character after this long break. Let's focus on something else. When they bring Mr. Puzzles back, he needs to remain consistently characterized with how he is presented once he returns, and they should also keep him consistent with how he is characterized in the prison scene from wotfi 2024. Basically, keep the characterization consistent. He should never be presented as being motivated by fame and creative expression, since we've established that he has gotten over those desires, and he absolutely should not be presented as a serious and or threatening antagonist again, as he has been defeated 3 separate times now, and he has often been presented as a cartoonish and pathetic character. He would really, really not work as a main antagonist ever again, probably. But he could still work as a less serious and more minor antagonist, akin to the role SMG3 used to play in classic SMG4 episodes. When Mr. Puzzles inevitably appears again in the next story arc, he should either play the role of a comic relief side antagonist, with a new antagonist being the true big bad, or he could work if playing more of a protagonist role, as was the case in the Meme Factory arc, where he was still a villain, but the story followed his perspective of events. That could possibly work too. Moreover, ideally, we should give Mr. Puzzles a new character arc in 2025, but this time make it more substantive and consequential than what we got in the Meme Factory arc. Since that character arc in the Meme Factory arc was just repeated again in wotfi, so it wasn't exactly consequential. Ideally, this new character arc would expand upon his character development from last year. What if he has fears of being abandoned by a friend again, as, after all, the only friend he has ever made basically left him twice. As a result of this fear, he actively avoids creating bonds with other characters, and so his character arc would involve him having to learn to be willing to open up to others and have faith in them, in order to create a real friendship that isn't with an inanimate object. In fact, Leggy 2.0 could actually serve an interesting purpose within the narrative, funnily enough. Serving as sort of a symbol of Mr. Puzzle's fears. He constantly holds on to his fears, represented by Leggy 2.0, until he eventually learns to let go of his fears, as would be represented by him getting rid of 2.0. At this point, I'm straying into fan story territory, admittedly, and so I'll stop there. I'll just finish by saying that for such a character arc to work, Mr. Puzzles would obviously have to meet and befriend another character who helps him learn these lessons, though whoever this character could be is up to anyone's personal choice. Any character could realistically do. Anyway, that sounds like the basis for an emotionally gripping and substantive idea for Mr. Puzzle's narrative, I think, I hope. That's just a possibility that I came up with, that hopefully the writers will come up with something better than that, or just as interesting. Since the idea I just came up with contains a character arc, a message, and some emotional beats that would flow from those two former things. Well, I think that could work quite well as a direction to take him in. The last thing they could do to redeem his character writing is maybe expand upon some aspects of his lore and backstory that have never been explained or were never explored in all too much depth. The most obvious things in this category being his relationship with Puzzle Senior, or how he obtained a demonic keyboard, or what the origin of his insanely powerful TV head is. Exploring these further could allow for there to actually be some, like, Mr. Puzzle's deep lore for once, instead of him just sort of existing. We've got an interesting lore and origins for SMG4 and 3, and it seems like we'll be learning more about the lore and origins of Karen soon, expanding upon the brief glimpses we've gotten of her backstory before. Currently, Mr. Puzzles is far less interesting of a character in these sort of like backstory and lore aspects, especially compared to the examples I just listed. So hopefully expanding on these things I highlighted. It doesn't necessarily have to be those things particularly, just expand on something about Mr. Puzzle's character that's never been, addressed in much detail before. That could just make his character more interesting, in my opinion, give him more depth. So in conclusion, Mr. Puzzles was intended to be one of the most important additions to the SMG4 canon, and one of its most interesting original characters. At least that's what it felt like back during the Puzzlevision saga before the movie released. He was going to be the next big thing following the Cosmology saga. Yet, while the proper introduction of his character has been important to the series, as he is a very frequently used character, me and many others hoped for something much more, greater and substantive than this, such as an emotionally compelling and interesting story and character arc, or the introduction of intriguing and, deep new lore that changes how we look at the series, sort of like what the Cosmology lore did. So 2025 is the chance for all of this to happen, I think. 2025 is a chance for Mr. Puzzle's character to be redeemed from his messy writing that they gave him in 2024.